We're here to announce the arrest and indictments of Vito, Frabizio, and Joan Mangles on a number of drug transactions involving the sale of fentanyl, cocaine, and mixtures of both heroin and fentanyl. These sales were numerous sales, 3 in total, on 3 separate dates, to a Suffolk County Police Department undercover officer, and in the case of the defendant Frabizio, to 51-year-old Frank Cairo, who subsequently died from a drug overdose. Now, we chose this case because we believe it's emblematic of what's happening in Suffolk County. It's emblematic of what's happening right now in Suffolk County with regard to the opioid overdose crisis, the sale of fentanyl on our streets, and the inherent challenges and difficulties that we in law enforcement have in prosecuting these cases. This case also evinces the commitment of all of Suffolk County law enforcement to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law anyone who would sell these dangerous drugs on the streets of Suffolk County. And regarding that commitment, I want first and foremost to thank Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison for his assistance in this case. Not only Commissioner Harrison's assistant in this case, but in his assistance in all cases involving the sale of dangerous narcotics, the commission of dangerous felonies, as well as any crimes that negatively affect the quality of life in Suffolk County. Commissioner Harrison has been a tremendous assistance to my office, and I thank him for that. I also want to particularly thank the Suffolk County Police Department's narcotics section and their commanding officer, Dave Tufel, for their assistance in this case. This case is just one of the many cases that Dave Tufel, the undercover officer, as well as the undercover officer's team, investigates every day. And I know it must feel as though they're shoveling against the tide, but I also know that their work is vitally important, as I think you're all about to see. I also want to thank some individuals in my office, Narcotics Bureau Chief Mark Murray, as well as Narcotics ADA Dana Grimaud, for their tremendous work in this case. They work diligently, and most importantly, in cases of this nature, they work fast to ensure that we could finally hold Vito Frabizio in bail for the commission of these crimes. What I want to do now is I just want to go over the facts of this case. The facts are somewhat involved, but I think it's important because I think the facts really underscore the inherent difficulties and challenges we have in prosecuting these cases. So the case started on March 7th of 2022. At that time, the defendant, Vito Frabizio, he contacted the undercover officer in this case. At the time, Frabizio was using 2 separate phone numbers, 2 separate devices, and using those 2 separate devices, he negotiated a drug deal with the undercover officer in Sayville. They had negotiated for the sale of cocaine and heroin. That alleged drug transaction was consummated in Sayville. The substances were tested, and one of the substances was cocaine, and regarding the second transaction, the substance came back positive for both heroin and fentanyl. That was on March 7th. The next day, March 8th, 51-year-old Frank Cairo was at his residence in West Babylon. He was there. He was attending a Narcotics Anonymous meeting via Zoom when he was discovered dead from an apparent drug overdose that was later confirmed to be, in fact, a drug overdose. The overdosed team responded to the location, and they recovered a number of items of evidence. They recovered a quantity of fentanyl, a separate quantity of a mixture of both heroin and fentanyl, which again, that's the dangerous substance in all these cases, 3 hypodermic needles, and the decedent's cellular telephone. The decedent's cellular telephone was analyzed, and it was found that it had been wiped clean, that the decedent apparently had wiped all of the text messages clean until the text messages on March 8th, shortly before he died. Those text messages that were still on the phone indicated, well, first off, the analysts uncovered a contact by the name of Vito, and there was a phone number, And the phone number for Vito was the same phone number that was used by Frabizio to consummate the drug deals with the undercover officer on March 7th. There was also text messages between Vito and the decedent shortly before the decedent's overdose. The decedent first questioned Vito. He said that the drugs he had gotten tasted funny. They tasted like baking soda. Frabizio allegedly replied on the Vito phone and indicated that the drugs were definitely not baking soda. He also indicated that he had additional quantities of both fentanyl, which he referred to as white gas, and heroin for sale. In light of the death of the decedent on March 8th, on March 9th, Suffolk County narcotics detectives once again reached out to Frabizio on the two phones that he had earlier transacted drug sales on, and once again Frabizio negotiated a drug sale with the undercover office, this time at the Sayville Motor Inn. Acting on instructions allegedly provided by Frabizio on his phones, the undercover met him in front of a hotel room at the Sayville Motor Inn, where the undercover participated in two drug sales with Frabizio, two hand-to-hand drug sales, one for fentanyl and the other one for cocaine. While those drug transactions were occurring just outside the open door of the hotel room, the officer was able to look inside the hotel room, where he saw Joan Mangles inside the hotel room and what he believed to be quantities of narcotics. After the undercover left, the surveillance team maintained surveillance of the hotel. A search warrant was obtained through my office, and that search warrant was executed. Inside the hotel room, both Frabizio and Mangles were arrested. Quantity of cocaine and fentanyl was found inside the room, as well as scales and other drug paraphernalia. The Mangles and Frabizio were both searched incident to arrest, and allegedly quantities of both cocaine and fentanyl were recovered from each of them. Also allegedly recovered from Frabizio were the two cell phones used in the prior drug sales with both the undercover police officer as well as the phone that was used to correspond with the decedent shortly before his death. Approximately $4,300 in cash was recovered from the scene, and the ensuing investigation that proceeded over the course of days revealed that since July of 2021, Frabizio had been supplying drugs to the decedent, and that he sold drugs to the decedent as recently as March 7th, 2022, which was one day before the decedent died. Subsequent to the execution of the search warrant and the drug transactions on March 9th, both Frabizio and Mangles were arrested. But because of our bail reform laws, we were unable to ask for bail, so they were immediately released. Mangles was released, I believe, immediately, and due to other issues, Frabizio was not released until March 16th. So we continued the investigation. We're trying to link Frabizio with the decedents, with the sale to the decedent prior to his death. Both Frabizio and Mangles were out. We had their phones. Suffolk County PD had no way in which to contact them, so they were essentially out and untethered, which was potentially a very dangerous situation. Fortunately, 9 days later, on March 25th, 2022, Frabizio took it upon himself to contact the undercover officer, and notwithstanding his arrest, he said, "I'm open for business. I'm available to sell drugs to you." Thereafter, the officer, now he's using a new set of phones. They negotiated yet another drug deal. This time, Mangles allegedly participated in the negotiations, and thereafter, both Mangles and Frabizio, allegedly acting in concert, transacted two separate sales of drugs to the same undercover officer in West Babylon. Once again, it was a sale of cocaine and a separate sale of fentanyl. Immediately after that immediately after that sale, Frabizio was arrested as well as Mangles. Their apartment in West Babylon was searched, and once again, quantities of fentanyl and cocaine were recovered. 29 pressed tablets of fentanyl were also recovered in the house, and one of the phones that was used to transact the 325 drug deal, that was also found inside the home as well. So subsequent to their arrest on March 25th, both Mangles and Frabizio were then presented for arraignment on March 26th. Now at this point, the case involving Frabizio transacting the drugs with the decedent, that case hadn't been put together yet. But we were able to ask for bail in this instance because both defendants, Mangles and Frabizio, were released on a prior felony and then just had been arrested on a new felony. So under bail reform, we could ask for bail in that case, and we did. We asked, in the case of Frabizio, we asked for $100,000 cash, $200,000 bond, and $500,000 partially secured bond. Notwithstanding that application, Frabizio was released on $5,000 bond. He was out again. So again, we have his new set of phones. He's out with Mangles. We don't have an ability to contact him. And again, the dangerous situation persists. Luckily, due to the fine work of our Narcotics Bureau, they did an expedited grand jury and they indicted both Mangles and Frabizio. And on March 29th, Mangles was arraigned. She was arraigned under indictment 71040 of 22. And she was charged at that time with her March 9th possession of drugs at the Sayville Motor Inn. She was not, interestingly enough, charged with the sale involving the March 7th sale to the decedent because there was no evidence that she was involved in that at all. She was held on $25,000 bond at that time. On March 31st, Frabizio was then arraigned on that same indictment. And in that indictment, Frabizio was charged with possession and sale of drugs to the undercover officer on March 7th, possession and sale of drugs to the decedent on March 7th. This was the first time that we were able to charge Frabizio with the sale of those drugs to the decedent, which made our bail application much stronger. He was also charged with possession and sale of drugs to the undercover officer on both March 9th and March 25th. And at that time, he was held on $100,000 bail as we had originally applied for. Today, for both Frabizio today an indictment was unsealed regarding both Frabizio and Mangles involving their sale of drugs to the undercover officer on March 25th, as well as their possession of drugs in their apartment on March 25th. Frabizio was arraigned on that, and he was remanded without bail in that case. Mangles, her case was adjourned on April 20th for arraignment, but she's remanded pending that arraignment. So I think, as you can see, these cases are very difficult and time-consuming and involved, but they matter. And they matter because of individuals like Frank Cairo. Frank Cairo was struggling to escape his addiction, and that's hard. He was actually at our Narcotics Anonymous meeting when he met his end. And it's particularly hard when you have drugs readily available on the street. It's particularly dangerous when those drugs include fentanyl, but it matters. And what myself and my law enforcement partners will do everything we can to make sure that individuals like Vito Frabizio, who allegedly prey on the weaknesses of others and sell these dangerous drugs, are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and are placed in jail at the earliest possible time. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
What was he charged with originally that allowed him to get out?
Well, he was originally charged with the March 7th sale to the undercover and the March 9th sale to the undercovers.
And that wasn't enough to
That
keep
under
him?
bail under the bail laws, we could not ask for bail.